والشرط ما يلزم من عدمه العدم ولا يلزم من وجوده وجود ولا عدم لذاته كتمام الحول مثلا لوجوب الزكاة. A shart is a precondition, okay, or it is something that is a precondition. He says, what does this mean? It is that whose absence necessitates the absence of a ruling, but whose presence does not necessitate the presence of a ruling or its absence. Right? Something whose presence does not necessitate either the presence of the ruling or the absence of the ruling. But if it's absent, then the ruling is absent. He says, like what? Like the passing of a year, or the passing of a complete year obligating zakat. Or like wudu. Like wudu. If you don't have wudu, you can't pray. Right? If you don't have wudu, you can't pray. If you do have wudu, it doesn't necessarily mean you can pray. Neither does it mean you can't pray. Because why not? Because it is a cause. It's not a cause, but it is necessary for the performance of the action, but it is not sufficient to perform the action. Okay? Okay. And then you have the mani', the preventative. ما يلزم من وجوده العدم ولا يلزم من عدمه وجود ولا عدم لذاته كالحيض لوجوب الصلاة. The mani' is the opposite of the shart. That whose presence necessitates the absence of the ruling. If it is present, then the ruling is absent. If it is absent, then it neither necessitates the presence nor the absence of the ruling. Okay? An example of that, and the best way to remember these as examples, all of these three are in and of themselves, not taking into account any other factors. Okay? Like what? Like hayd. If hayd is present, you can't pray. If hayd is not present, it may mean you can pray, it may mean you can't pray, but by and of itself, it doesn't have any impact on whether you can pray or not. The fact that there is no hayd, if you don't have hayd, doesn't mean that you can pray. It also doesn't mean that you can't pray. Okay? So, it is not sufficient. Its absence is not sufficient to bring about anything. Okay? But its presence is enough to prevent the ruling. Clear? You're all happy with those three? Okay. Then he moves on. وَأَمَّا الْحُكْمُ الْعَادِي, he goes to the second category now. The second type of attribution, which is an empirical or a customary attribution. فَهُوَ إِثْبَاتُ الرَّبْطِ بَيْنَ أَمْرٍ وَأَمْرٍ وُجُودًا أَوْ عَدَمًا بِوَاسِطَةِ التَّكَرُّرِ مع صحة التكلف وعدم التأثير أحدهما في الآخر البتة. What is an empirical or a customary attribution? It is the establishment of an apparent connection between two things. Here specifically, an apparent causal connection between two things, either in terms of presence or absence. بواسطة التكرر, with the intermediary of takarrur, and takarrur means it invariably, one thing invariably follows another thing. Okay? One thing, takarrur means repetition. Here it means one thing invariably follows the other thing. Okay? When you have A, then you have B. However, مع صحة التخلف, right, that it's clear that one thing follows another thing, right, and you always find that وعدم تأثير أحدهما في الآخر. However, there's no necessary connection between the first thing and the second. The first thing does not actually bring about the second thing. The first thing does not actually, in reality, bring about the second thing. Okay? Like what? Sun, the rising of the sun, and light. Or day. The rising of the sun and day. Right? He'll give examples. Okay? But pretty much every natural phenomenon. There is a connection between the two. It is an apparent causal connection. It's invariable, but there is no necessary connection between the rising of the sun and the occurrence of day. Or, if you make a better example, between putting something in a fire and burning. Putting something organic in a fire and that thing being burnt, for example. Okay? So this he called the hukm adi. Now why is it mentioned in the works of theology? Because of the principle that things by and of themselves are not causative. Okay? Created things have no ability to cause anything else. Only God has the ability to cause things to occur. Okay? But he'll come to that. وأقسامه أربعة. There are 4 categories of حكم عادي. ربط وجود بوجود كربط وجود الشبع بوجود الأكل. Right? The connection of presence with presence, like the connection of satiation, like the connection of the existence of feeling full with the existence of eating. So you eat, you feel full. That's one type. Second type, رطب عدم بعبد كرطب عدم الشبع بعدم الأكل. Okay? The non-existence of one thing is invariably connected to the non-existence of its its twin, if you like. So you don't eat, you don't feel full. Okay? Then ورطب وجود بعدم كرطب وجود الجوع بعدم الأكل. Right? That the absence of something brings about the presence of another thing. Right? Or the absence of something is invariably connected to the presence of something else. So not eating inevitably brings about a feeling of hunger. Right? So you don't eat, you feel hungry. And the last is رطب عدم بوجود كرطب عدم الجوع بوجود الأكل. Right? The presence of something brings about or is invariably connected to the absence of something else. So if you do eat, then there is no feeling of hunger. Then you can insert any two things that are connected to any two causal relations in the dunya with that, basically. But he's given a clear example that we can all understand. Everyone happy with that? So that's the second category. Third category, وَأَمَّا الْحُكْمُ الْعَقْلِي. As for rational attributions, rational connections, فَهُوَ إِثْبَاتُ أَمْرٍ أَوْ نَفْيُهُ مِنْ غَيْرِ تَوَقُّفٍ عَلَى التَّكَرُّرٍ وَلَا وَضْعِ وَاضِعٍ. Okay? As for rational attributions, it refers to the establishment of something or its negation, neither on the basis of توقف على تكرر, on the basis of experience, or repeated experience, nor on the basis of a وضع واضع is the of God decreeing that it is so, that it should be so, not on the basis of a command from God or an arbitrary an arbitrary relationship. Okay? So what does that mean? Let's just take a minute to pause and think about what that means. The definition that he's given, and this is just the Muqaddimah. This is written for ease of remembering. This is ease of memorization. The commentary contains the detail. But what is Imam Sanusi actually saying here? He's saying that the hukm aqli is a relationship between a concept and a concept and a thing and another thing, that is not based, and it either is a relationship of that something is established for something else, or it's not established for something else, neither on the basis of an arbitrary decree, okay, like Allah says, for example, that that wudu is a precondition, is a shart of prayer. Why is wudu a precondition of prayer? Because of wad'u wadi'in, because Allah has said so. Not for any other reason, but because Allah has said so. Allah has said that Dhuhr is an obligatory prayer. Why? Because He said so. That's it. That's how the hukm, the connection between Dhuhr and obligation, that's how it's established. God said so. End of story. Right? What is the connection between the rising of the sun and dawn? Or the rising of the sun and light appearing in the sky, or the dawn and light appearing in the sky? Right? It is a relationship that is based on, it is tawaqquf ala takarrurin. It is based on repeated experience, right? That's happened, and if you trial and error, things that have happened over and over and over again. Okay? So because it always happens, your mind makes a connection between the two things. Now, what is a rational attribution? It is an attribution that is made that is neither of those two things. It's neither of those two things. So what is it based on then? If it's not based on your experience, or human experience, if it's not based on simply being instructed that it is so, then what is it based on? What is it based on? Okay, so he says, وَأَقْسَامُهُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. There are three types: al-wujub, wal-istihala, wal-jawaz. Necessity, impossibility, and possibility. Alright? فالواجب ما لا يتصور في العقل عدمه إما ضرورة كالتحيز للجرم مثلا، وإما نظرا كوجوب القدم لمولانا عز وجل. Necessity, logical necessity here, is that which the mind is, or that whose non-existence is impossible for the mind to conceive of. Okay? And Shaykh Yasir, when he came, went into great detail about this. Okay? But this is the basic definition. That whose non-existence the mind is unable to conceptualize. That which is because it must be. That which is because it must be. Sometimes this is immediately apparent, daruratan, كالتحيز للجرم, that a body takes up space, for example. And sometimes it is only apparent after reflection and logical reflection and contemplation, like the necessity of the pre-eternality of God, like the necessity of God existing outside of time. Right? Certain things. If I say to you, this must be because it cannot be any other way, you'll say, yeah. Other things I'll say, this must be because it cannot be another way, you'll kind of go, but what about this? Answer. Well, what about that? Answer. Hang on. What about that? Answer. Okay, I suppose it must be. I suppose I can't conceive of it being any other way. Okay?
So just on that point, so because that goes to some argumentation.
Why are you saying it's not self-evident?
Because there's daruri and nadari.
is the nadari not self-evident?
If it was self-evident, then why would you need to engage in any discussion?
Okay. It depends how you define self-evident. It's not immediately self-evident. Once, however, you understand it, it is self-evident. So if I say, Sa'ad is going to die. Alright? Now, is that self-evident?
Yes.
Why is it self-evident?
Well, that's a hukm adi.
No. Why is it hukam adi?
Because it's experience.
Hmm?
You're saying, I mean, unless you understand that Sa'ad is immortal, in that sense.
But that's my point. Yeah? So you can... The famous question was long enough. The famous syllogism. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Okay? A deductive conclusion, or a deductive syllogism. Yeah? Now, how does this come about? Imagine yourself in Aristotle's time. Aristotle said, or Socrates said, I should say, Socrates says, I, Socrates, will die. I am mortal. Okay? You can ask a question here. Socrates, how do you know? And Socrates will say, my father died. My mother died. My grandfather died. My grandmother died. This person died. That person died. That person died. That person died. I am a person. I will also die. What type of argument is that? So it's an inductive argument that is based on repeated human experience. Every human being I have ever known has or will die. I am a human being, therefore I will also die. Okay? So you would say an inductive argument is from a particular to a particular, or from a set of particulars, right? You know, my grandfather was a human being and he died. My grandmother was a human being and she died. My great-grandfather was a human being and he died. My grandmother was a human being and she died. So these are particulars. Each one is a particular instance. And you either argue from a particular to a particular, so you say, I am also a human being, so I will also die. Right? Or you argue from a particular to a universal conclusion. A died, B died, C died, D died, therefore all human beings will die. Okay? That's called an inductive argument. You can argue from a set of particulars to another particular, or from a set of particulars to a universal conclusion. Alright? And pretty much the whole of science is that. All your ahkam adi are that. Every morning the sun rises, therefore every morning the sun will rise. Or every morning the sun rises in the east, therefore the sun always rises in the east. Or every morning the sun rises in the east, therefore tomorrow morning the sun will rise in the east. Right? Each instance of the sun rising in the east is a particular. The sun rising tomorrow in the east is a particular. The argument that is being made is an inductive argument. What's a deductive argument? A deductive argument is an argument where you argue from a universal to a particular. So the easy way to say that is the use of the word all. The use of the word all. All men are mortal. What that means is that it is part of the nature of being human that you will die. It is a necessary part of your human death, is a necessary part of your humanness, or mortality is a necessary part of your humanness. It's what's called, and this is why critical thinking is so important. Sanusi, remember, this is a Muqadima to theology. It's a Muqadima to theology. Right? Why? And this is the first thing he explains. Why? Because understanding this is critical to understanding theology. You can't understand theology properly unless you've understood this stuff, right? So this is what you would call here a sifa lazim. It is something. It is a quality of humanness. Mortality is an aspect of humanness that cannot be divorced from humanness. Right? This is the argument being made. You can argue the premise, but it is an attribute of humanness that cannot be divorced from being human. What do I mean? Okay, can you have a human being who is never able to see? Yes, of course you can. Someone blind from birth. Is the ability to see, therefore, invariably linked or linked necessarily with the concept of being human? No. Is it generally a quality of being human? Yes. Or the ability to speak, let's say, to actually form words? Yes. Okay? So can you say that does it make sense to talk about a human, a blind human? Yes. Does it make sense to talk, can you do the same thing with the quality of mortality? If you talk about an immortal human, a human that is immortal, okay, does it make sense to talk about an immortal human? Now, the argument that is made in the syllogism is no. No. There is no such thing, by definition, there is no such thing as an immortal human. That's the argument Socrates is making, right? That, or whoever, I forget, Aristotle made it, right? He was talking about Socrates, but Aristotle made the argument, yeah? And he's talking about that's a universal. And here, this is the universal. Socrates is part of that, he's one bit of that universal, because he is human, he is a man. Therefore, he must necessarily be attributed with the quality of mortality. Yes, go on.